Hey there, this is John from thediscard.com, back again with another one-ticket commander build. If you are unfamiliar with the one-ticket commander format, it's pretty straightforward. You build an entire commander deck on Magic the Gathering Online for a single ticket or less. This deck we're looking at is Jori En Ruin Diver, and it comes in just under one ticket here, 0.99 tickets. The prices will fluctuate quite a bit on Magic the Gathering Online, so it's important that whoever you're playing with, you sort of have an agreement about how you want to handle prices that change. For example, there are a lot of cards you'll see us play in foil because a lot of the foil cards happen to be cheaper on Magic the Gathering Online than the non-foils, so you buy those up and then you'll see the price maybe go up a couple cents as people get the non-foil versions. I think a lot of people just don't like that animation on the card, or they don't like the way it changes the look of the card. So typically you'll just want to come up with a cutoff point. You could say, hey, we're going to play this format. The format is so cheap that you can honestly afford to go buy a new deck whenever you want, more or less. If you need to get a new deck, you can just sort of go buy a single ticket. A single ticket often costs less than $1, even if you're buying from a lot of the popular card bots out there. We use Card Hoarder and a couple other sites when we're finding our prices. But the important part is come up with a way that you're going to agree on the prices. Here, we enter them into MTG Goldfish. You can also find my decks over at Tapped Out, and you can just sort of keep track of the price here. Additionally, when we're playing, we add in this caveat that if the price goes up by, let's say, a tenth of a ticket or so, if it gets up into that 1.1 ticket range, then you sort of need to start making some cuts and adjustments to get the price back down, back into that 1 ticket range. When I speak about the people I play with, I really mean Corey over at cardknocklife.com. You can go visit his site to find his deck list. I'll link it in the video description. And also over at thediscard.com, you can find links to everything and my full written write-up of this deck. Now let's get into Jori En herself. Jori En is a 3-mana, 2/3 Merfolk Wizard, and whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card. And the goal for this deck is to really cast as many spells as we can. It's largely a blue-red spells deck, and we want to bury our opponent in value and card advantage. If you think about the way a card like Jori En works, if you can reliably cast 2 spells every turn, all of your turns in the early game, and hopefully your opponent's turn as well in the later game, you just get a one-sided Howling Mine, and you will have so many cards that it's going to be difficult for your opponent to dig their way out of it. So a lot of times we will either want to take the risky play of casting Jori En on turn 3 without anything to protect her, or take a safer route of casting Jori En on turn 4 or 5 with a second spell immediately after. So even if we're not protecting her, we are getting that card value, that card advantage the first time we get her on the board. And she does count herself as one of the spells you cast that turn. So with that, let's take a look at sort of some of the themes we've got going on in here. Like I said, it is really a blue-red spells deck, but I want to take a look at the first sort of category of cards I have in the deck, and these are cards that make it easier to cast 2 spells per turn. So they're largely going to be spells that are quote-unquote free, or more or less free. So first, we're going to take a look at Mindclaw Shaman. This is a 5-mana 2/2. For 4 and a red. It's a Viashino Shaman, if you're into the Viashino. Looking to see maybe if those guys make a comeback someday. But anyway, when it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell from that player's hand without paying its mana cost. This is pretty straightforward. You cast Mindclaw Shaman, hope that your opponent has an instant or sorcery that you can cast. If you do, you get that second spell right away. And you have a body that's on the board as well. That's not insignificant. Even though it is kind of a smaller body, it's still kind of a nice advantage there. We have a number of spells like Peregrine Drake. This is a 2/3 for 5 mana. It's a flying creature that says when it enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands. So most of the time, this means you're going to cast Peregrine Drake. Once Peregrine Drake resolves, you untap those lands. then you're completely left open to cast your second spell for the turn. We have a couple other cards like that in the deck, including Palinchron. Palinchron is sort of its bigger brother here for 5, a blue and a blue. It is an illusion, flying 4/5, and when it enters the battlefield, untap up to 7 lands. The other cool ability with Palinchron is you can pay 4 mana to return it to its owner's hand. So this one, if you get into the late game, you can reasonably cast this, over and over and over again. Likely every other turn, potentially even more than that if the game goes really long. Similarly, we've got, where is it at in my list here? We've got Frantic Search. This is an instant for 2 and a blue, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. Again, this is a card that once it resolves, it kind of pays for itself by untapping the lands. And then lastly, we've got Rewind, counter target spell, then untap up to 4 lands. Same sort of idea. We're countering something, and then we're going to play some other cheap spell on the opponent's turn to get that advantage of drawing another card. This is particularly tasty when we use it to save our Jori En, because not only are we sort of ending up on cards over our opponent, we're kind of ruining their plan there. We have a couple other things that can help us cast more than 1 spell per turn. We've got Unsubstantiate, so if we really need to draw some cards, we can unsubstantiate our own spell to return it to our hand, sort of cycle itself. Otherwise, it's just a pretty valuable spell for dealing with creatures on the battlefield that we can't destroy, or spells that we just need to take another turn before they resolve so we can find an answer for them, or just survive that 1 extra turn to close the game out. And then we also have Quicken. Quicken is a spell that I think is generally underrated in Commander in just overall. Not necessarily even in this format, but it is, if you're playing a spells-based situation like this, 1 mana, the next sorcery spell you cast, this spell can be cast as though it has flash, basically, and you draw a card. So worst case scenario, you can just cycle it and count it towards your spell for the turn, so you kind of get to cycle it for a second card if you have some other spell to cast, or you can cast any of the number of sorceries we have in the deck on the opponent's turn, and you can really catch them off guard with a lot of stuff they maybe couldn't have planned for otherwise. So that's one of the sections. One of the categories of cards here, stuff that makes it easier for us to cast 2 spells or is essentially free. The next section is kind of stuff that literally cares about sorceries or instants in some way, makes it easier for us to cast them, makes them cheaper, or gives us some really good benefit when we do cast those spells. So we've got Curious Homunculus. This is a 1/1 Homunculus for 1 and a blue. You can tap to add a colorless to your mana pool. Spend this only to cast an instant or sorcery. So it is a mana dork in blue, which you don't really get many of those. It's limited to instants or sorceries, but we're totally okay with that. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 3 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, which will happen pretty quickly with this deck, you flip or transform the Curious Homunculus into Voracious Reader. This is an Eldrazi Homunculus for 3, or 3/4, I should say, with prowess, and instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So not only is this thing going to help itself transform, it's going to transform relatively quickly, and once it does, it makes all of our spells cost less, and it gets bigger when you cast more spells, so pretty strong effects overall. Next, we've got Goblin Electromancer. Pretty classic in storm builds and stuff like that. It just makes instants and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. It's a 2/2 body, though you're probably not going to be attacking with it that often. We've also got another goblin here, Gutter Snipe. This one is a 2/2 Goblin Shaman for 2 and a red, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. This really, really adds up quickly. When you can cast 2 spells per turn to draw a card off Jori En, which gives you more spells to cast, and you're dealing 2 damage for each of those spells. A lot of those spells might actually be burn spells to begin with. It really adds up very quickly. You don't need to deal all that much damage to the opponent for Gutter Snipe to have paid for itself. Really killer also in Iconic Masters. very fun set. I do like drafting spells in that set, especially when you can get a Gutter Sniper too. We've also got Docent of Perfection. This is another transforming card. This time it is an insect horror. It's a 5/4 with flying for 3 blue blue. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Then, if you control 3 or more wizards, transform Docent of Perfection. So another card that's giving us a little bit of extra value each time we're casting instants and sorceries, which we want to do anyway. When it transforms, it becomes an Eldrazi insect. Still has flying. It is a 6/5 now, and wizards you control get +2/+1 and have flying. So if you have those tokens sitting around still, they get a whole heck of a lot better. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue wizard creature token onto the battlefield. So you still get to create more of those tokens. They just get even bigger. Up next, we've got one of what I think is the most powerful cards in this deck, Jace's Sanctum. This is an enchantment for 3 and a blue. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so we've got another cost reduction. But here is the most important part. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you scry 1. With Jori En in play, this becomes even better because you are scrying twice before you draw your card, and you can stack the second scry so that you scry first and then draw the card. So you get to dig through that many more cards before drawing the card that you're going to draw off of Jori En's ability. After that, I'd like to touch base on just a couple more cards here. These are some cards that I think are just particularly good in this deck. They maybe don't necessarily fit the theme all that much, but they just give you powerful effects that we're not really going to want to live without in the deck. First is Curse of the Swine. In 1-ticket Commander, I think this is maybe the best blue sweeper that we've got. It is X blue blue for a sorcery. Exile X target creatures. For each creature exiled this way, its controller puts a 2/2 green boar creature token onto the battlefield. There's going to be a whole lot of times when your opponent has stuff you just cannot deal with. 1-ticket Commander has a lot of creatures that are very big. They're very hard to deal with, and they're surprisingly inexpensive because they maybe just aren't quite that power level that would get them into Commander normally. Curse of the Swine can just get rid of them. And if you're playing against a Reanimator deck, any kind of deck with a lot of recursion, Curse of the Swine just takes care of those creatures. It's totally worth it to exile a single creature, but if you can wipe out the opponent's board with it, even better. Another card that I really like in the deck is Clout of the Dominus. This is probably my favorite way to play this deck is turn 4, you cast your Jori En, and then immediately follow it up with Cloud of the Dominus. This card, if you're playing a red-blue commander, incredibly powerful. It doesn't do a whole lot if you're not getting your commander on the board, but what it does do is pretty amazing. For a single blue or red hybrid mana, you can enchant a creature. It's an aura. As long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and Shroud. Check, we've got that. And as long as the enchanted creature is red, it gets +1/+1 and has haste. Check, we've got that as well. Now we've got a 3/4 haste Shroud on turn 4 that has also drawn us another card. Our opponent's going to have to wipe the board entirely or do some other sort of trickery to get rid of our commander at that point. And for a single mana, it's a pretty great aura in the deck here. So yeah, that is more or less the entire deck. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in here. We've got a lot of direct damage. We've got some counter spells, a lot of value stuff like Mind Swipe that can counter a spell and deal damage to the opponent. We've got Suffocating Blast that can counter a spell and deal damage to a creature. We're really just trying to pump out as many spells as we can, deal as much damage as quickly as we can. We're staying mostly low to the ground here. And I think it's just a lot of fun and very aggressive when it's firing on all cylinders. You may hiccup with the mana here or there because it is 1 ticket. We're not really playing very good mana. But I think this deck is really exciting. I think it's a commander that you can very easily build and upgrade at home for a very reasonably priced commander. You don't really have to break the bank. You can see here, like I said, our paper cost is only $44. That's not far off from the pre-con commander decks, and there's a good chance you have a lot of these cards already, or you have even better cards that don't fit within the very strict budget of one ticket commander that you could use to upgrade to this. There's so many different options you can go with it, but one thing I do want to point out is the way that we play one ticket commander on our one ticket commander challenge videos for the discard and card knock life is strictly 1v1 and with the standard commander ban list. So if you are playing with this with a group of players, you're probably going to want to swap out some of the targeted removal and stuff like that for some more generalized threats, and just a little bit of stuff to sort of keep you in the game longer, because aggressive decks don't really do very good in a 4-player game or something like that. If you come out of the gate swinging and you have more than one opponent, chances are you're going to be seen as a target right off the bat and just get taken out. So anyway, that is the deck. Make sure to check the links in the description for the full playthrough against Corey's deck. I'm not quite sure what he'll be playing, but hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. And check out thediscard.com for more one ticket commander.